I love my MacBook Pro, and it's for good reason. You get industry-leading performance, battery life, trackpads, keyboards. It's basically the best laptop that money can buy. It's just that to buy it, you need a lot of money. So when Apple announced the MacBook Neo, the laptop I've got in the box here today, for $600 or $500 with educational pricing, I was kind of like, holy shit. This is no ordinary MacBook, I assure you. We're used to seeing MacBooks with Apple's M series of processors. You've probably even seen the early ones, like the M1 MacBook Air, for similar pricing to this new MacBook Neo, maybe at Walmart or whatever. But this one is different. Look at this citrus. Wow. I wish they came out with an orange one that matched my iPhone, but you know what? I'll take this. There's 3 other colors. We've got a silver, there's a pink, and there's a blue, but this definitely caught my eye over everything else. But the color is not all there is to talk about here. I mean, sure, there's a 1.5 meter USB-C cable in here and a 20-watt charging brick. But what's interesting about the MacBook Neo, aside from the price and the color, is what's inside. See, this uses Apple's A18 Pro from last year's iPhone. An iPhone CPU in a laptop. What? It might sound crazy, but think about it. It's a way lower cost chip, and it's pretty similar in architecture, at least on a broad level, because Apple's been building their M series of silicon that they use in their laptops on the ARM architecture, which is exactly the same architecture that iPhones have been using for years. So the fact that they can now take that iPhone chip and slap it in a laptop, it's not really surprising at all, but it's really, really exciting. Look at that. Wow. Oh man. But before we get into using it, I need to talk about the outside of it, because the ports are also pretty interesting. As you probably know, iPhones only have one port on the outside, right? So does this have Thunderbolt like all the other MacBooks? You do get 2 USB-C ports, but neither of them are Thunderbolt. One is a 10 gigabit port like those Pro iPhones have and supports DisplayPort output, and the other is just USB 2. They both support charging, but there's no Thunderbolt to speak of, which some people might not love, but remember, $500, $600 laptop, all right? We've also got a 3.5mm headphone jack over here, and what on first glance might look like an SD card slot, but no, that's actually a speaker port. We've got to crack this open and look inside, but for now, let's take a look at all of the other interesting bits. It's a 13-inch laptop, 13-inch screen, and then there were 2. There is actually 2 different versions of the MacBook Neo. Ignoring the color options, we've got the base model for $599 with 256 gigs of storage, and the Neo Plus is what I'm gonna call it, with 512 gigs of storage and a fingerprint reader. The base one does not have one. I honestly don't really use the fingerprint sensor, so it doesn't bother me, but it's something to keep in mind, and especially considering that 50 gigs or so of the storage are actually used by default, it's really a 200 gig MacBook. But if you're just using it for like Google Docs and email and whatnot, that's still plenty, and you should be able to do plenty with it. And what also might bother you if you're used to a fancier MacBook is potentially the keyboard and the trackpad. You see, since the mid-2010s, Apple's been using a haptic touchpad on their MacBook Pros, and I think since like 2018, 2019 on the MacBook Airs. This is taking it back old school. It's a physical touchpad that actually literally moves in and out as you click it. The MacBook Pro's touchpad does move, but it doesn't have a click action. That's actually done by a little haptic motor that's vibrating as you click. I do think I prefer the haptic touchpad on the fancy MacBooks, but this is totally acceptable. The keyboard, on the other hand, types great. You should subscribe to Jakku, baby. Yeah. It doesn't feel crazy different to me than my MacBook, but what you might not like is that it doesn't have backlighting. Backlighting? No backlighting. Could be a problem for you if you're a big night owl and you don't have a little light on the side. Also, maybe just turn your brightness up, all right? Sheesh. I don't know if it's exactly the same keyboard as is on a MacBook Pro, but it feels damn near identical to the keyboard on the MacBook Air I just tried. So yeah, that's great. And despite the click maybe not being the most satisfying haptic experience ever, it does track well. It's definitely still an Apple trackpad, and for that, I am grateful, because at this price point on some cheapo laptops you get at Best Buy or whatever, the keyboards, the trackpads, there are good options, don't get me wrong, but you gotta make sure you try them, and at least going with this, you know that you're getting something that's well built. It's aluminum chassis and everything, right? What you might not be getting, however, is the performance you want. Oh, what just happened? The screen just went black? Oh, hopefully mine isn't defective. I'll tell you, the one thing that Apple definitely has is the R&D budget to make a cheap laptop's speakers sound really good. The amount of cheap laptops with speakers firing downwards, and bouncing off. Those are great when you're in bed. Not. It sounds great. I'm getting stereo separation. Like, you cover the ports on the side. It's terrible, but that's full volume. It's not distorted. That is huge. It's not gonna sound as good as a MacBook Pro, but what about a MacBook Air? The MacBook Air is really tinny on the high end, and this does sound a little bit muddier, but more balanced. Overall, I would prefer to listen to this over the MacBook Air. Maybe I'm crazy. It's probably not gonna beat the MacBook Air on the webcam, or maybe it will? They're both 1080p, and looking at the preview on the MacBook Air, I think that it looks visually more pleasing, but it also looks kind of smooth. Like, look at my beard. It actually has like a fair bit more detail on the MacBook Neo's webcam. Like, it looks like a worse overall picture, but it's almost like looking at a 720p image that got upscaled to 4K, and then the MacBook Air was just a 1080p image, if that makes any sense. I don't know. There you are. And in playing the clips back now, I think the MacBook Neo's webcam is worse, but it's also still totally fine. In a pretty dark setting, the MacBook Air definitely has a better webcam, but the MacBook Neo's one is also fine. It just looks like the webcam from an old MacBook, and frankly, comparing these two is kind of funny because the price difference, it is large. Speaking of light, the screen, it is lit. It is an IPS LCD panel, 219 pixels per inch, liquid retina, 500 nits peak brightness, just like a MacBook Air. It looks pretty good to me, and in practice, the screen is exactly what they say it is on the specs page. I tested it with Kalman Ultimate in my my little display tester. It hit 500 nits brightness, exactly as they claimed, and I was shocked when I did the color accuracy test. Now, sure, SDR, or standard dynamic range, is not the hardest thing to do in the world. However, it's pretty impressive for a laptop to come out of the box with like a 0.65 average delta E. That's the difference between what color the machine is trying to show you and what it actually shows you. That is like professional level good. Like, you could edit photos and videos on this thing and have not a problem in the world knowing that what you're seeing is what you're actually going to be delivering to your clients. That's fantastic. And the color gamut coverage is also really good. That is, so long as what you're working on uses the sRGB color space. It does cover 98% of that, but for the other color spaces like P3, 73%, and BT 2020, 52%, nowhere near as much coverage. You're definitely not doing HDR workflows on it because it doesn't do HDR. But that's fine. If I needed to review a video with this thing on the go, I'd be good to go. I mean, sure, the viewing angles is not nearly as good as my MacBook Pro, but it's totally usable. It's a cheap device, man. It is what it is. But you know what's not cheap? Having your identity stolen or a family member get scammed over the phone. But with today's AI easily capable of faking your voice or your face in a video call, having your personal information out there is a whole new level of danger, especially for your less tech-savvy family members who might not be able to tell the difference. That's where Incogni, who sponsored this portion of today's video, can help. Incogni works by tracking and removing your personally identifiable information from the internet by going after the data brokers and people search sites that could be selling your info without you even knowing. Just think about how many times you've entered your phone number, your address, your name, date of birth on a website, maybe even just to buy something online. That data isn't always handled as well as it should be. Fortunately, getting set up on Incogni is super easy, and they even have options to protect your entire family. Plus, with their unlimited plan, if you find your data on a site they don't already cover, just copy paste the link into Incogni and their team takes care of the rest. I gotta tell you, the peace of mind I get from knowing how much harder a scammer's job is if they can't find my family members, it's huge. And it's even better that I didn't have to spend days to get it. So take your personal data back with Incogni by using code JAKU for 60% off an annual plan at incogni.com/JAKU or at the link down in the description. Now, despite what the naysayers online would lead you to believe, this is a very capable laptop. It's not the fastest thing in the universe. It is, however, still 6 cores, 2 performance, 4 efficiency. It's got a 5-core GPU. It's got 60 gigabytes of memory bandwidth. It has specs, but it also only has 8 gigabytes of RAM. And that is one of the biggest points of contention I've seen online. I see people say, whoa, 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's like 3 Chrome tabs. First off, maybe get a better browser. And second off, I'm gonna prove you wrong right now. I got Crab Rave playing in 4K in the top left, the Apple stock chart up on the top right. I got a GitHub repo open here on the left, just checking it out, clicking through some files. And in the bottom right, I'm playing classic Minecraft. And I'm screen capturing it all at the same time. So yeah, the MacBook Neo, it can do stuff. I mean, sure, we're probably doing it a bit of a hurt. 35% utilized, that's not even that bad. Our memory pressure is definitely high, but it's not swapping, even with all this stuff in use right now. Hell, let me open up some more tabs here. Oh no, man, my MacBook Neo, it can't do real work. I know what I'm talking about. I'm a dude on Twitter. Yeah, look at that, boys and girls. Guess what? I mean, sure, it's swapping a little bit now, but the music is still playing. The Minecraft is still Minecrafting. And it can also do a hell of a lot more than that, like edit a 4K video in DaVinci Resolve over the network with suboptimal footage that's interframe rather than intraframe. I mean, it's not like the craziest, best timeline performance I've ever seen in my life, but it's totally usable. And the reason it can do this is Apple's really, really strong investment in their silicon into making hardware acceleration a big thing. There's H.264, HEVC, ProRes acceleration on basically every modern Apple chip, and the A18 Pro is no exception to that. Here, look, I'll take this clip, and you know what? We're gonna crop it a little bit on the left. Yeah, yeah, to get that hats out there. And then you know what? We're actually gonna make it zoom, and you know what? I'm gonna stabilize it. Ooh, 60 FPS, look at that, it's running great. Hey, there you go, now boom. You know, just to add insult to injury for all you people, I'm even gonna screen record at the same time. There you go, boom. You see, look, memory usage, it's pretty full, but it's working. Now I'm screen recording and I'm editing in Resolve. Maybe I'll make my editor edit a whole video on the MacBook Neo just for funsies. Oh, and you know what, here, let me check the screen recording. Flawless. Hardware acceleration, baby. On one hand, the MacBook Neo's performance is actually kind of impressive when you compare it to, say, an M1 Air. It's like 20% faster single-threaded in Cinebench 2026. In Geekbench's single-threaded score, it's 47% higher. In the multi-threaded score on Geekbench, it's almost 5% faster. It's potentially pretty good on paper. That is maybe until you compare it to, I don't know, the M5 powered MacBook Air, which is a substantially more expensive device, but this is also a substantially slower device. In 3D Mark's Solar Bay Extreme Ray Trace test, 68% slower. In Cyberpunk, 54% slower. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, almost 59% slower. Blender Monster CPU render, 59% slower. Blender Monster GPU render, 58% slower. Puget Bench Photoshop, 61% lower. Puget Bench Premiere, 61% lower. Puget Bench DaVinci, fuck. It's tough. It's tough. And hey, at some point, maybe you'll even be able to install Linux on this thing. For realsies, in my 2 days of messing about on this laptop, sure, it doesn't quite feel as extremely instantaneously snappy as my $5,000 MacBook Pro. But this is not a $5,000 computer. One thing I really wanted to see is how fast this thing charges, because as you might recall, it only has a 20-watt charging brick and a battery that's about half as small as the one in the M5 MacBook Air, which I've got right below it. They're both dead, and we'll see how fast they charge. And there you have it. It charges about half as fast, 30 watts roughly, instead of 60, assuming you have a charger that can go at that speed. The one that it comes with is only 20 watts, and it has bigger than half the size battery. So it definitely charges much slower than a MacBook Air, but it also doesn't have anywhere near as much battery life. The MacBook Neo scored 9 hours and 45 minutes in my endurance video streaming test. That's a 1080p stream, 200 nits brightness on the screen, audio off, whereas the MacBook Air was 15 hours and 45 minutes. That's a 6-hour difference. Pretty closely correlates to the size of the battery, so it does make sense. But even though this is a lower powered system, Apple's power efficiency is no joke on the higher powered systems when they're not doing much, and it shows. It's still not bad, but it's definitely something to be aware of if you're comparing the two, and battery life is a huge deal for you. On the thermals and power front, it stayed nice and cool on the exterior of the chassis, unlike the MacBook Airs like to just roast the shit out of you. I'm like 95% sure that the board in here just it doesn't have a heatsink and doesn't even connect to the chassis. This thing thermal throttles pretty much instantaneously. Here is a 3D Mark run I recorded the temperature and power data from, and you can see right as the test starts, 17 seconds into our recording here, we're at 7.5 watts on the GPU. Yeah, that's power, baby. But we're also at 104 degrees on the GPU. And it stays there pretty consistently until the power is dropped enough, down to maybe 3.5 watts, for the GPU to come down to a much more reasonable 102. But is this just limited to the GPU? Maybe this CPU is better, right? Wrong! Cinebench multicore. Right as it starts, we're at 7 watts on the CPU. We're cruising, right? And then pretty much immediately, the CPU temperature is up to 100 degrees, and our power draw, again, drops to like 4 watts. Yeah, it's hot. I kind of wonder if you could make the MacBook Neo better by just like adding a thermal pad. But what does it have for cooling? Why don't we find out? Man, Apple's hardware design is truly something else. This actually looks like pretty repairable, shockingly. That's Trackpad right there. There's a little ribbon cable for it, the big chunk of battery here. Yeah, it looks like the whole tray will just come out. And then you can just replace the battery like that. That's pretty sleek. I mean, I'm just trying to think of what it would be like if you were a school and you bought like 5,000 of these things. Kids would break Chromebooks like no other. And there's the speaker module right there. It's very plastic. There's the 3.5 mil jack right there. It's color matched plastic, that's cool. Oh, look at that. There's the 36 watt hour / 9600 milliamp hour battery right there. You know, this is probably there for if you accidentally spill something into this thing, it doesn't 100% destroy it for sure. There is the entire brain of the MacBook Neo. And as expected, there's no thermal pad to sink the heat into the actual chassis of the laptop. It's just this circuit board and like the metal cover on top of it. So you could probably make the Neo way faster by adding a couple thermal pads in here at the expense of making the surface temp a little bit higher. Like if they made a Mac Mini that was like $299, that was just this board, it's basically a Raspberry Pi, man. And then these are like springs, I guess, basically. Huh, that's kind of cool. I don't know if I want to take this off. Ooh, there's Loctite on these. I guess you don't want your trackpad to come loose. That would suck. Oh my God. Has a little bit of gasket material on the other side. And oh yeah, there you go. Now you can see the springy boys. You see that? And that's how the trackpad works. Repairability wise, seems pretty great, actually. I mean, obviously, the computer part of it is not upgradable in the traditional sense. As much as there's space for them to have put an M.2 slot on this thing. That would have been cool. One thing I was really curious to try is this Realtek 10 gig Ethernet dongle. For some reason, it's not negotiating at 10 gig, even though I got a 10 gig switch, but it is working at 5 gig, and I'll take it. 5 gig all day, baby. Look at that. Sheesh. Especially if you're used to 1 gig, man, that's 5 times faster, and it works. No problem. Let's try the Wi-Fi. And while it does seem a touch slower than the M4 series, which also has Wi-Fi 6E, I'm getting like 1200-ish up and down on the M4 MacBook Air and 900 and 1000-ish on the MacBook Neo. That's still plenty fast to do pretty much anything. It's a pretty impressive little machine. Don't get me wrong, you probably can get a Windows laptop for the same amount of money that would be faster. But I pretty much assure you it's not gonna have as good or color accurate of a screen. It's not gonna have as good of a keyboard. It's not gonna have as good of a trackpad. It's probably not gonna be made out of a nice aluminum unibody like this. But think about it. If you're buying a laptop for your nan or your mom or your whatever, and you just need something that like works, the MacBook Neo's pretty sick. Backlit keyboard and like, please, a Thunderbolt port would be huge. I like it a lot. But let me know down in the comments what you think of the MacBook Neo. And if you like the color, it'll be linked down in the description. Also down there will be some links to other MacBooks that you can get for a similar price used on eBay, because that might honestly be better for you. While you're down there, get subscribed and maybe hit the like button if you like this video. It's pretty cute, man. I love the color.